Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates of Executive Council. As previously announced, as there is only one resolution, the discussion will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all of our colleagues on the committee today, and also to the Premier and his staff for continuing to, I guess, work through this committee process of the Committee of Supply. I wanted to begin just by picking up some of the discussion that we were having in question period. We know it is a really severe situation in the ICU, and the time limits in QP don't always give enough time for a thorough accounting of some of the information to be shared. So I recognize the Premier did share that there were 8 nurses which have arrived, ER nurses, if I recall correctly off the top of my head. There was an additional request for nurses and respiratory therapists. Just to begin, I wonder if the Premier can let us know when those additional resources, human resources, would be expected.
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, beyond the information I shared with the member earlier, I'll commit to updating them when we have more to share, but I don't have anything else to add to the personnel that I had referenced earlier. I didn't reference earlier contact tracing, I don't think. That we had asked for 50 contact tracers. I should emphasize that that would only add about 5 or 6% to our actual contact tracing contingent that's been working double time here recently. But it would be helpful, but I have nothing to add on that front yet. So I'll continue to provide updates as I get them to the House, and certainly share those with the member. I gathered up some, member raised hydro, and then a subsequent questioner had raised hydro issues as pertaining to privatization or something to that effect. So I gathered some additional info on questions that were asked there. I can share that, but I'll probably run out of time. I'll just see if there's any subsequent questions.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks again, Mr. Chair. So also in question period today, the Premier said, I forget the exact verbiage, but basically that there was an ongoing conversation, perhaps additional resources being requested from the federal government. So can the Premier give us an update in terms of what has been requested in addition to the initial ask of 50 and 50 critical care nurses, 50 contact tracers, and the RTs as well?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, no, nothing's changed from the original information I shared with the member on the asks last week, and then on the update today. There's nothing new there. But I will share with the members of the committee the information I undertook to provide on Teshmont since it was raised. It was raised in the context, I think, of an accusation about the government or Hydro wanting to privatize. I should just clarify for members that Manitoba Hydro purchased back when they were in the midst of taking the Bipole West line under to task against the advice of experts at Manitoba Hydro and against the position of their own board. They decided, the previous administration, not, I should mention the members of the opposition presently, undertook to build the Bipole line out the west side of the province and back in a big giant loop that would carry it several hundred kilometers further than was necessary at great loss of transmission. At that point in time, Manitoba Hydro undertook to buy a share in Teshmont Consulting, which was to give it primacy when it needed engineering services for the bipole construction. When it finished the bipole west line, it then sold its share in Teshmont Consulting to Stantec Consulting. So in 2002, it bought shares in Teshmont for local HVDC expertise. That would help it construct bipole 3 transmission line and converter stations. And that would give them consulting work for a time at least relevant to those two projects for stations and HVDC divisions. When bipole went into service on July of 18, Hydro decided that was the right time to divest itself of its shares in Teshmont. So far from being an example of the intention of Hydro itself to be private or of the government to, this was simply a practical business decision since there wasn't a need for the services to the degree there had been during the construction period for the bipole 3 west line. There were no job losses at Hydro as a consequence, no impact on Hydro's operations. Hydro will continue to be a customer of Stantec, which now has Teshmont Consulting as part of its operations, so the business relationship will continue as needed. The business decision made in the best interests of customers doesn't constitute privatization in any way, shape, or form, and to link the two is erroneous and factually inaccurate. And I would tell members of the committee to understand that the Manitoba government had no role whatsoever in any decision around Teshmont. That's a Manitoba Hydro decision. So just to share that with members and to put that issue to bed, I hope that gives clarity and peace of mind to the members that I'm sincere when I say I believe that the real owners of Manitoba Hydro should remain Manitobans. And so that is not on the agenda, nor has it been on the agenda.
The leader of the official opposition.
Yeah, I think many Manitobans were really disappointed to hear the Premier attack people in ICU and to blame people who were fighting for their lives, many of whom were intubated at the time when the Premier went out and carried out that basically what resembled a partisan attack, though of course it was on the people that his government has a responsibility to care for. But I wondered whether the Premier could share any information about the following. You know, can the Premier tell this committee the number of people who are currently in hospital that violated public health orders or in some other way didn't cooperate with public health?
The Honorable First Minister.
Sharing that information would clearly, based on the member's earlier preamble, open me up to charges that I'm somehow blaming the people in the ICUs who didn't follow public health orders for not following public health orders. It's not my intention to blame anyone. It's important that Manitobans know the importance of following public health orders on their own merits. I would encourage the member to apologize, as the federal leader has already done, the NDP leader, for violating public health orders. Immediately apologize, and good for Mr. Singh for doing that. That being said, it's, you know, that horse has been out of the barn for quite a while, and appears the member's pretty proud of his willingness to break public health orders. He shouldn't be. He should be ashamed of himself, and he should apologize. That being said, the member did say on October 1st, and this is why I'm addressing October 8th, I'm sorry, that and I'll quote from Hansard, nonetheless, this Premier and his cabinet and his advisors sold off Teshmont. Now it looks like they're making moves to sell off other subsidiaries soon. Will Manitoba Hydro, and then he asked the question, which Manitoba Hydro subsidiary does he plan to sell off next? Would it be Manitoba Hydro Telecom, Manitoba Hydro International, and then he appropriately and quite rightly ran out of time. So I'll simply say to the member, there's absolutely nothing in his assertions from October 8th, which he's repeated numerous times since then. And I should share with him in respect of Manitoba Hydro International that it's a relic the NDP maintained, in particular the foreign consulting aspects of Manitoba Hydro International, long past any point of logic. That really, as much as there may have been great work undertaken by Manitoba Hydro International, it was not focus on Manitobans, most certainly, that guided that work. I can also share with him that other Canadian utilities long ago abandoned their overseas consulting operations because they were incredibly heavy on capital and risky. And so overseas activity undertaken by the previous NDP government through Manitoba Hydro International was not something that Manitoba Hydro of the present day felt was in keeping with their focus on strategically going into Manitoba-centered activities that could benefit Manitobans. The overseas business that has done good work, I'm sure, in more than 60 countries over the last 20 years and worked with various governments is an unpredictable and highly risk-oriented type of business. It's perilous, potentially. It's the focus of the work is in unstable countries in Africa and Asia. To give the member an example, one of the contracts was a World Bank contract in Kenya through the Kenya Power and Lighting Company, which has 10,000 employees. It's a big operation, 1 million customers. But back in 2008, Kenya was hit with violent clashes that killed hundreds of people. And so you're talking about Manitoba Hydro personnel in their foreign consulting operations being exposed to that very, very high level of risk in these other countries. It's a huge challenge and a highly one that exposes Manitobans to high risk. So that's just one example. I could give the member many more. And I think weighing those risks was what other provinces did when they decided that it wasn't a wise investment for them to continue doing through their public utilities. Yet, under the NDP, we continued to stay on the global stage, quietly, most certainly. I don't think most members are aware of the operations. If they are, the member could certainly share some of his knowledge of Manitoba Hydro International's consulting arm with the committee. But for me, a lot of this is news, and I've followed things around the province, and particularly with respect to Manitoba Hydro, their operations and goings and comings.
Honourable First Minister's time has expired. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, I'll just note the Premier is responding to question period questions from the last sitting. And I guess it took his team that amount of time to work up their comeback. So we'll look forward to their comebacks in the fall sitting for some of the issues that we raised today. I do note that even though the Premier went out and publicly attacked people, that he can't provide any numbers to back it up on the hospitalization front. So I'd ask about the ICU front. Can the Premier provide the number of people currently in ICU that violated public health orders or who didn't cooperate with public health?
The Honourable First Minister. Well, I would remind the member that close contacts to known cases is the cause of over 2/3 of the people who've acquired COVID. They may have done that through accident, but given the public health orders, it's highly unlikely unless the known case was someone in their household, because we have public health restrictions, which the member continues to not apologize for breaking, which would limit such close contacts. So again, though the member keeps misrepresenting it, I will continue to urge Manitobans to follow the public health orders he so willingly and blatantly disregarded. And I will remind all Manitobans to get vaccinated. And I will remind all Manitobans to cooperate once, if they are unfortunately diagnosed with COVID, to cooperate with the contact tracing folks who are working their tail off to try to reduce the spread of COVID by notifying folks who are in contact with those, have been in contact with those who could have exposed them to COVID. I would also remind the member that it was he who raised the issue of privatization at our last discussion with respect to Manitoba Hydro, and it is I who have undertaken to answer his questions. And so I'll continue to do that, as I have throughout this process, as he knows every year he's been involved in it, unlike the previous NDP administration, who willfully ignored any requests for information I might have had of them. I should remind him that when he makes an accusation, which is as significant as that this government is trying to privatize Manitoba Hydro, he should expect me to answer it, and I will. I'll remind him that virtually no other utility in Canada has any dealings outside of its own jurisdiction at all. Most Canadian utilities abandoned their overseas work for years ago to focus on domestic issues. So when he talks about privatization as a goal of the current Manitoba Hydro management, he's out of touch with the reality. Hydro-Quebec got out of their international involvement in 2005 and 6. Back when the member opposite was, I'm not sure, a rapper or something. In Ontario Hydro, used to have an international arm that did consulting work. They got out of that international operation in 2003. I don't think, they might have been accused at that time of privatizing, but I'm doubting it. Hydro-Quebec got out of their international involvement. Ontario Hydro got out of their international involvement. Manitoba Hydro is talking about doing the same thing now, repatriating what they can use to provide better services to Manitobans, but getting out of the international consulting field. So BC Hydro got out of their international consulting in 2001. SAS Power in the mid-2000s as well, entirely out of it. They do domestic work now. That's what Manitoba Hydro is talking about, focusing on domestic within Canada, at least. I understand. I can share with the committee members their vision document if I can get it from somebody here, and give you a better picture of their rationale, but their focus would be on Manitobans and power in Transcona, not so much in the Transval. So they're going to be focusing on Manitoba services and Manitoba customers, hardly an example of anything other than focused management. And certainly it follows the decisions that were taken in other Canadian hydro utilities a decade or a decade and a half earlier than were taken here. I guess it could be argued, if the member would like to, they should have done this sooner, but it could hardly be argued effectively based on other examples around Canada that they took the action. It could be argued too late that they took the action, not too early. So just sharing that with the members, because it's Manitoba Hydro's decision to better reorganize their business model. That's what they're going to focus on doing. And that's the intention. The arguments, the boogeyman of privatization that the member likes to raise at every opportunity, like Pavlov's dog, he salivates every time I say hydro, he says privatization. The fact remains that the two examples that
The
he's
Honourable
given.
First Minister's time has expired. The member for Kiiwetinoong?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is my audio okay? Can I get a thumbs up if I'm good there? If I could ask the First Minister, with the discovery of the 215 children in Kamloops Indian Residential School, I'm wondering, and this was a discovery. It was something that's happened many generations ago, it's many years ago, but it's still happening today. I'm just wondering if the First Minister can respond and comment exactly how Manitoba as a government is going to support the search for and the disclosure of potential massive grave sites here in Manitoba.
The Honorable First Minister.
Yeah, I've got a good list of activities that we're undertaking. Most of them are in partnership, as a member to understand, with the feds, because it's the feds that have the lead on this. But I'm looking for a list, so they're just going to track it down of activities, and I'll share that as soon as I get it from my able assistant. But this is heartfelt pain, this event in Kamloops for many, and a reopening of sores for so many people that I'll just throw a couple of quick things on the record here. I had the experience of visiting that site in Kamloops when I was working with a friend of mine named Manny Jules. He's Mr. Jules is a chief for many years of that Kamloops band. And we were working through ideas on how to advance quality of opportunity for Indigenous Canadians through a variety of means. So it's had a couple of really good days benefiting from Mr. Jules' experience. There was an awareness then of that there was a site, but there wasn't the detail that came out on the weekend. And that work has now resulted in the knowledge of over 200 children buried on that site. And I can't begin to fully appreciate, but I try to, the degree of pain that is being experienced now by victims of residential schools and by survivors and by their families on this. I shared my sympathies with the opposition leader earlier, sincere sympathies, because I know his dad had this experience, and I know that wasn't a good experience, to put it mildly and not to be euphemistic about it. This is a conversation that has to happen, you know, and when survivors tell their stories, it's not just so they can lament. People sometimes say that's not the reason. The reason is so we can learn together, heal together, move forward together. It's vitally important that Canadians understand and listen to these stories, and they understand and listen to the realities of the experiences, life-altering experiences of people who have their families disrupted and abused. It's critical that we have that conversation and grow together in our understanding. That's what the purpose of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I was proud to be part of the government that set it up, but it's not for political points. I say that. I think it was long overdue. It should have been something we had done generations before. And it's, I think, critical we act on these, the work and the recommendations together. It's critical that we move into, in every respect, more than redress, into a direction of equality of opportunity, economic opportunity, social equality. And that's sure, a lot of that is money. A lot of that is attitudinal change too. And I think part of that has to come from hard lessons like this, getting out there. And I'm proud of the work that the folks that did this discovery and the research they did, the time they invested in this is important. We have to understand that for many people, this is going to tear them up. I put on record for anybody who is listening outside of for our members too, if this is something they can benefit from. The Indian Residential School Survivors Society's got counseling support. People should avail themselves of it if they think it's necessary and helpful. I hope they do. 1-800-721-0066. Also, the Survivor Society has a crisis line, 1-866-925-4419. Our government's been very conscious of the Path to Reconciliation annual report. We've moved to act on a number of the recommendations in the TRC already. I have reminded on several occasions the federal government on a variety of the TRC recommendations in our chances to lobby for them to act. The calls to action 71 to 76 are on the burial information piece. And in the TRC, they make a variety of recommendations.
Honorable First Minister's time has expired. The member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you. I was the Premier alluded to a list of items that they were going to be implementing. I was wondering if he could table that list and the timelines for that implementation of that list.
The Honorable First Minister.
The report I have is largely by its nature directed at pushing the federal government. And so as far as timelines are concerned, that'll be a federal government responsibility. But, you know, we have, certainly our minister and I have familiarized ourselves with the TRC on numerous occasions. We endeavor, the recommendations that we endeavor to pursue at the federal level are many. On section 71 to 76 on the missing children and burial information piece, really important ceremonial rites are considered when remains are discovered, proper reburial practices undertaken. These are points that we have emphasized to the feds. They've got, I don't have the list here. The member probably has more information on this specific piece than I do, but I understand there are numerous across the country initiatives underway, many locally driven, that we've encouraged the federal government to support. We're supporting their endeavors in respect of providing any records that the federal government needs, Crown land records, ownership information, anything to do with residential school burial sites. I'm familiar to some degree with the Brandon situation there. We've endeavored to assist. Ownership information that helps with getting to the facts is important. Appropriate memorial ceremonies, commemorative markers, things like this are really critical to making sure that not only the people involved in this are not forgotten, the children are not forgotten, but that we don't forget, that we do not forget. This is critical. And so, you know, I can't speak for former Justice Sinclair, but I know that much of the TRC in the section on missing children burial information was by necessity directed right at the federal government, because the documents, most of them are in federal hands already. And the burial sites and the documenting of deaths that occurred there is work that the federal government needs to undertake. That being said, we're working with our Indigenous partners on protection of Indigenous cultural heritage, which is one of the aspects that was recommended in this section of the TRC. Let's go back for a sec because I referenced the Manitoba Hydro Strategy 2040. I'd share it with the members last Thursday, I think. So I'll just quickly review that. Manitoba Hydro is shaping their long-term strategy to align their provincial energy and economic policy and working to mitigate risks and leverage opportunities. So the Strategy 2040 is a 20-year outlook with strategic direction anchored in the best interests of Manitobans. I'd emphasize to the members who like to make this accusation of privatization that there is no reference in the Hydro 2040 plan and their 20-year strategy to privatization, but there is reference to 5 key components of their strategy that will articulate Hydro's commitment to their customers. 1, safe, reliable energy. 2, serving customers efficiently, responsibly, and digitally. 3, helping Manitobans efficiently navigate the evolving energy landscape. 4, maximizing the benefit of our clean energy advantage. And 5, keeping costs as low as possible. None of these things were the emphasis of the offshore Manitoba Hydro International consulting operation that grew so much bigger under the NDP administration previously. It was apart from this. So these are the new priorities of Manitoba Hydro. They want to focus on Manitobans' needs, serving Manitobans with reliable, low-cost energy. And I support them in their efforts. Implementation of this business model is already underway. There's no change in the overall headcount planned at Hydro, but there is intention to get out of the foreign consulting business, which again, no other utility is involved in, and nor will Manitoba Hydro be involved in it, except as I understand it, to finish off some contracts that are already in process.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the record, I didn't remotely ask a hydro question and that somehow lead into a hydro response. The tragedy that is before us today, and it's been existing for a number of generations, and it is at the forefront today. And the Premier is somehow feeling the need to dodge the question. So I do want to get back and focus on the question of the mass grave sites that the Kamloops to Sukuk First Nation discovered. And they knew about it. They knew about it for generations. And nobody took it to heart, but they knew where their people were. And that same thinking and that same knowing goes across the country, and including the province of Manitoba, including the residential schools that existed here in Manitoba. So I'll ask the Premier again, will there be a commitment from the provincial government to either partner with the feds or actually take the initiative to commit to funding these searches for these mass grave sites in residential school areas here in Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Far from the member's accusation of dodging the question, he, I believe, also raised questions about hydro on Thursday, and I undertook to answer his questions, and I'm attempting to do that. As far as his accusation about dodging the issue, I just spoke passionately and sincerely about an issue that matters deeply to him and me, and so I resent that. I really do. I think he's not right in making an assertion. I've undertaken on every question the NDP has raised through this process now since I became Premier to get them the information they asked for, sincerely. And now I'm giving him information on a specific issue he raised in addition to the questions about grave markers and so on, and the investigation into the graves of children buried on the sites or near the sites of residential schools. So I don't think that's very fair. And I'll say that to the member, because I thought him to be a fair man, but on that one, not true. Look at We all have a responsibility to learn and to educate ourselves about the legacy of residential schools. I've endeavored to do that personally. I encourage every member who hasn't to do that, and if they have, to do it again and repeatedly. As far as the focus should be nationally, and with the federal government, we have offered support in every respect to encourage them and in support of their efforts. If the member has specific questions he wants to raise about specific projects that he feels should be undertaken, I will most certainly offer this commitment to him. We will encourage the federal government and support them in every way to address the sad legacy of residential schools.
The member for Kiiwetinoong.
So further to that commitment, will the province also financially commit to these searches and in support of the potential federal program or whatever the federal government comes up with? Will the province then financially commit to that also, not just in terms of moral support, but will there be a financial commitment? If there is an ask from the federal government, will the provincial government commit to that financially?
The Honorable First Minister.
Yeah, like, I can't give a blank check to the federal government, so I don't know what their projects are. We've encouraged them to undertake, under the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations, to follow those recommendations and act on them in this respect and in several others. And we're already offering staff time and support to some of the initiatives they have underway. But again, I just encourage the member, if he's got initiatives that he wants to be specific about, I'm certainly interested in hearing them. And we'd certainly be interested in pursuing additional avenues of attack on this. A joint statement or a unanimous statement from the House encouraging the federal government might be helpful. I see the Liberal leader on here. It'd be nice to have him join with us on this. I know he's reticent to offer any direction the federal government that might be taken as disloyalty to the federal Liberal Party. But in this case, I think he might consider that his primary source of interest should be, and I'm sure sincerely is, the best interests of Manitoba families affected directly and indirectly by the residential schools that operated here. So if I'm very open to the suggestion, if we could do a unanimous statement calling on the federal government to do take some action in Manitoba on some specific issues beyond what they're doing, I'd be very supportive of that. But again, just a couple of months ago that in Hansard, that the NDP leader said that we were cutting Manitoba Hydro International and then it meant privatizing. So I'm attempting to put his mind at ease. He's clearly worried about it, or he wouldn't continuously reference it. And the fact that he has referenced it means that it's important that I put his mind at ease. He shouldn't have to worry about that. So I will continue to provide information to the member on why he's wrong on the assertion that Manitoba Hydro International's disposition as a foreign consulting operation is somehow indicative of a desire to privatize Manitoba Hydro. Nothing could be further from the truth. I just got an update for the members on, I got it somewhere here, on federal information that they were made available to us. Yeah. The members asked about this last Thursday and again today. And so I hope the member doesn't think I'm dodging his question by answering it. Federal support, we began discussions a couple of weeks ago with the feds to pursue some specific supports. We didn't think, as I said the other day, that it would be appropriate much earlier than when we began the discussions, because there were at least 4 other provinces in far worse shape than us. And as much as we had, there was one possibility that we would need additional help, there were many other provinces needing additional help at the same time. However, now we're in a different boat. And so back a couple of weeks ago, we began to elicit support for ICU nurses, lab techs, contact tracing support, air medical resources, and some other things. It was apparent from the planning discussions between officials that some of that support might be more readily available than other support. So I'm continuing to give the members updates on the information that is being made available as soon as it is made available. I've undertaken to do that since the start of this pandemic. In respect of the nurses to support ERs and ORs, they were more readily available. Some of them are here now. I believe we have 3 RNs, 1 LPN in ERs right now, which frees up our people, our nurses, to go and work in the ICUs. I won't get into, because the members I know are very appreciative of the training that we've done, the orientation programs and so on, to upgrade the skill sets of our nurses here in Manitoba so they'd be able to go and work readily in an OR. We began that early in the pandemic, as early as more than a year ago, that training. So the fact that Ottawa isn't sending us ICU nurses shouldn't be taken as a slap at them. They're sending us some additional ER nurses. That frees up our trained ER nurses to move into ICUs. That's good stuff. It's important also to understand that we're very, very appreciative, and I know the nurses in particular are appreciative that we have some backup coming in, because there's been some pressures, obviously they're immense, on our frontline staff. Not just frontline dealing with patients, I'm talking frontline throughout the system. I reacted badly the other day when I felt the member, the NDP leader, was being critical of some people. I overreacted, I apologize for that, but I take it sincerely. These people are working their tails off. And so I get a
The
little
Honourable
defensive.
First Minister's time has expired. The member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to be clear, the Premier is committed to providing a statement, and nothing but a statement so far. The numerous questions asked about a financial commitment to actually bring some closure and some openness and responsibility to Indigenous people, Indigenous communities, and Indigenous children that have been lost to residential schools. And the only commitment given by this First Minister has been about a statement. And that's just insulting. You have the opportunity today to make a financial commitment to bring some closure, to bring some clarity, to bring some openness to this discussion of residential schools and the atrocities that were committed.
Order, please. The hour being 5 p.m., committee rise.